Hi, I'm John Ryan, and with me is Michael King, and welcome to the college handball preview version of the USA Handball Talk podcast. Mike, how are you doing? Everything, all the planning going good?
Yeah. Everything locks into place, which is good since we're about 26 hours out from kicking everything off, 27 hours from jumping into a 20 team tournament here. So fortunately, the planning is concluded at this stage, and now we're in the doing phase.
Yeah, it's always nice to go from the planning to the execution phase. Always nice to get that monkey off your back, if you will.
Yeah, I
Um,
think you have about 20 years on your website of the planning phase. So I,
yeah.
I can understand
Um,
that.
So JD, we missed we crossed over the times with when JD was available. So if he's available, he's going to hop on. But if not, we'll just you'll just be my stand-in for JD as we first run through a couple of news items. So first off, let's talk a little bit about what's taking place in Puerto Rico. In fact, we can even go live to
Yeah,
Puerto Rico. The U.S. is playing Trinidad and Tobago, and U.S. is up 16-7. And the U.S. men had a nice victory earlier today. Trinidad and Tobago gave them a good first set, but then they blew them out in the second set. And then Canada, with what I would think is a minor upset, beat Mexico in a shootout. So that's, I think, Canada's first big big victory in a beach handball official competition. Uh, I suppose you've been pretty busy. You've been able to follow any of the beach handball action.
yeah. I'm plugged into all of it. Yeah, like you said, I wasn't aware of that Canada Mexico result yet, but that is a big one because obviously Mexico would have come in as the uh, sub favorite to challenge our guys, and so it probably congrats to Canada on that for continuing to raise the level of their program as they continue to build forward. But obviously, should be you got to win the games on the court, but at the same time, it should bode well for our guys as far as what the level is and what the challenge will be at the top for them to secure another Norca Beach championship.
Yeah, just a little bit of note on Canada. I guess they were down in Brazil before this tournament, so they certainly were taking it serious, uh, getting in some good training there. Um, they actually lost the first set, came back and won the second set, and they were down 6-0 in the shootout, and came back to win 8-6. I've got the picture right there of the winning penalty save that gave Canada the victory in the sudden death shootout. So
You can roll two comebacks into one. That's something else. That must have
I
been
don't know if I've ever
quite the
seen
sight.
somebody come back from a 6-0 deficit in the shootout. You've got to you've got to work
No, I
that
mean,
perfectly.
no, exactly. I mean, at that stage, then one pointers for the team that's leading close it out. So, in generally speaking, in the shootout, to connect on a pass and throw in one pointers is uh, generally on the more academic side. So
Yeah, that's
I
even more
wonder
incredible when you
I,
add that factor
I
into it.
wonder what the means was that.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah,
I queued
impressive
it up.
stuff. And yeah, and credit to Canada, they've really jumped in on. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt, but yeah, I full credit to them. I've queued that up, and I'll put a link on it in the show notes because I definitely had to look back and see how the hell they did it. Uh,
Yeah.
but everybody else can also do the same. The other big piece of news is I stumbled upon it. My my morning check on mail usually is following through on the Handball World articles, and I saw this one on Olympic France. There's an Olympic week, or I'm sorry, International Week coming up, and they're training in Corsica. But then buried in the text was the piece of news that I wasn't aware of. I'd heard some rumbling of it, but the U.S. is going to play France in Lyon on the 11th of May. Um, so that's a big step up for our national team.
Yeah, they've been taking the opportunity since we're automatic.
Yeah. So you're breaking up there just a little bit, Mike.
Locked
Um,
in. Yeah,
so you're breaking up just there a little bit, Mike. Um, to continue on, the immediate question I had was, well, what is the U.S. men going to do? What are the U.S. men going to do for the NORCA championship? And so I got on the phone earlier today with Martin Brannick, and apparently the U.S. is going to send a two teams. One team will be didn't want to use the terms A and B team, but the team that will play France will be composed of mostly our frontline guys. But the B team, not really the B team, I should say, that's going to participate in the North American Championship at the same time will be uh, mostly composed of some up and coming players, but also a few quality players. I'm not sure how that's going to break out exactly, but it'll be an excellent opportunity for the U.S. to get a good look at um, the roster, maybe from athletes 12 to 25. Um, so what do you think, Mike? Hopefully we got the little bit of a static on your line squared away.
yeah. How are we doing? Are we clear?
You're 100% clear. Did you follow
Good.
my diatribe on the two
There we go.
teams?
Yep, I got every word of you. Yeah, and there's a little inside baseball that I'm aware of as an athlete rep from my time on the national team. It's candidly it was a bit of a mess because that was a late pivot with the opportunities to have sort of a Class A camp experience in Europe that overlapped with that event, and so the selection process to figure out how to get that 12 through 25, 12 through 30 group was was entirely absent about 6 weeks out, but it sounds like they've got it together. Yeah, it's going to be sort of that second tier group, up and coming guys, and then three or four veterans from the stateside that you'll recognize as well. So yeah, it'll be a good evaluation. It will be a good opportunity to see how things stack up, and honestly, it'll be a good litmus test for sort of where is Norca at. There have been a lot of turbulence with some of the other programs post pandemic, and with us bringing over a roster that's been, had won games at the World Championship now, it's sort of tough to adjudicate where is Norca now versus where it was 6 years ago. And I think this second side that has been put together will actually speak more to what's the state of everybody else in Norca more so than it will potentially the quality and promise of our side. So difficult to compare what's going on with players playing professionally in Europe in comparison to what's sometimes scraped together on this side of the Atlantic. But I think there'll be good evaluations all the way around for that.
Yeah, I think it's a uh, maybe a little convoluted how it worked out, but I think it's going to be a great opportunity. I feel like our first 10 players are pretty well known, but I've got some question marks from like, I don't know, nine on down. And there's some players I'm like going, I haven't seen these guys, get a lot of minutes in competitive matches. So I think it's going to be a really good opportunity to evaluate um, if the fringes of our national team, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's difficult with the level of resource to figure out, how the third league in Latvia compares to, X, Y, and Z, where else we're pulling, 25 to 40 in our pool. So it'll definitely be a good opportunity to at least, at the very least, we're getting a bunch of players that are on those fringes that maybe tend to be in groups of three or four on the back end of our normal training camps, where you'll get 15, 18 of them together in one place, which is certainly always better to do evaluations directly on the court rather than trying to mash up video from a variety of different sources.
And I'll just I'll take a little bit of exception. Um, Cuba, I think, is not very far behind the U.S. And even with our top team, not a given that we were gonna beat Cuba. Certainly the favorite, but it all depends on who shows up for Cuba. But they've got quite a few athletes playing professionally in Europe too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a stylistic and contextual element that's tough to judge at times too, of the way that the games play here versus when you go to a world championship stage and you're playing over in Europe. There's and I think the national team coaches would attest to this, is that the style of play at Norca events is an entirely different animal at times, which also lends to flattening some of those results sometimes, even when you're looking talent for talent, man for man, or woman for woman when it comes to the women up and down rosters. But yeah, it is curious sometimes because the team Cuba can field can absolutely vary pretty widely because they do have top end talent.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into the main topic now, which is the upcoming college nationals scheduled for Chapel Hill, North Carolina, campus of University of North Carolina. Um, Big tournament, especially on the men's side. 15, 15 teams, and I've pulled up a kind of a schematic of the competition. I'll even spell competition. I'll even fix that on the fly here. Uh, but if you can see it, can you go over a little bit of the well, look at that. I got Division Two wrong there too. Come on now. Can you go over a little bit of the general format with the two divisions and the two TBD teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have such a large field that, first of all, it wouldn't make sense logistically to try and shove that all into one division. And when you would subdivide that many groups, you really wouldn't be able to subdivide teams post group play in one weekend into potentially accurate ranking. And then second of all, we really want to focus on the team experience of last year's college nationals, for example. The average goal difference in games was over 11 goals. You say, oh,
Mike, you're breaking up a little bit again. So I'll
one-sided
go ahead and start
loss.
talking.
The
Hopefully, get
median goal difference was 13 and a half.
yeah, yeah. So
So we're, going through the exercise of having teams spend all this money to come play and have a net 5 games is actually okay.
so you're
Sure
breaking
thing.
up a little bit. We got the main gist to the point. Main gist, which was, hey, average goal differential, 13 and a half goals. Um, the teams, at least last year, seemed to break out into two uh, two cohorts, and essentially you've got it split off here in the Division One and the Division Two, but you also gave the opportunity for teams in Division Two to essentially play their way into Division One. Correct?
Correct. Yep. We subdivided teams by into regions, and the second team from each region was given the opportunity to play in. One team opted out of that opportunity and was fine going straight into Division Two, and then West Point Gold, based on their season-long results and previous nationals results, was already locked into Division One, having medaled at multiple events this year that were college and senior level competitions, and so they had earned their way in, regardless of being positioned behind the West Point Black, their traditional first team. It made no sense to treat them at the same level as the second teams from other regions.
So as I understand it, Pitt And San Jose State, however, decided to say, hey, we'd like to take a crack at a Division I school. So right out the gate, those two sides will play Division I teams. And talk a little bit about those two matches.
Yeah. So San Jose State, a first year program, very excited to have them. Obviously difficult to position where they're at on the spectrum, being so isolated geographically. But uh, you know, we're gonna find out exactly where they sit very early on, because in the random draw for their playing opponent, which we took between the two playing teams and then the locked in Division I teams, they drew the defending national champion, West Point Black. And so that'll be a really interesting game and a really great test for San Jose State, that has some guys that came up in Cal Heat's youth development program. And so, yeah, that one is a little bit more of a question mark. But we certainly know where West Point Black stands in the overarching hierarchy of things, and so that at least gives an objective viewpoint for us to situate San Jose State and for them to judge themselves. Um,
Absolutely. If
Carolina,
San Jose
and
State
then
wins that match, I'm starting to have conversations with Martin Balolo about taking over the men's national team program.
no question about that. That the their level of competitiveness there. It's all in terms of what else is going on in the country in terms of amateur development. Any level of competitiveness there is sort of icing on the cake. It's really great that he's gotten that program off the ground, and excited to see what they can do given the chance.
I fully concur. I think it's great that they're saying, hey, we want to measure ourselves. Maybe they didn't want to measure themselves against the 14-time defending champion, but hey, they will get a good understanding of where they stand before they most likely move into Division II. Um, the Pitt Carolina game, however, that one could be a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Pitt Pitt has looked really good in the matches that I've seen them this year. One of their best players from last year has transitioned into being their coach, and he has them doing things that look more like handball, which is always sort of the threshold that each of us as American players learning the sport. First just getting the basic skills down and using our athleticism. They look like a handball team for larger and larger stretches, as does Carolina with Aaron Ham as a coach, former junior men's national team player. So really impressed with the progress of both teams. Carolina still going to be a strong favorite. We don't have a FanDuel or DraftKings sponsorship, but I would imagine there's still a healthy margin there between those teams. That's why Carolina was able to secure their number one bid in their region. But Pitt can give them a game if things break right. They have players, they have athleticism, they have some natural talent and some better organization at the top. And so they played Ohio State Scarlet to a 3-goal game in the Trailblazer final, which I think Trailblazer Conference final, which I believe was one of their best results of the year in a couple of cross matches with Scarlet. So they might just be peaking at the right time.
Yeah. No, it should be interesting. If Pitt does win that game, they'll move into the Division I. I've pulled up the. We'll go down a block. If they lose, they'll play in Division II. So let's talk a little bit about Division I. I pulled up these records. We know they're not 100% correct. It's kind of hard to keep track of all the different matches in the different leagues, but they are representative, I think, of the sides that will be participating in Division I.
Definitely. Um, yeah, as you pull that up, yeah, it remains difficult because we have a nice nucleus of teams, a couple different places, and then Air Force playing the predominant share of their competitions against very high level senior opponents, or at least very high level for what we have to offer here in the States. They've played more games against me this year than they have other teams in Division I. So that's going to be quite interesting to see how that translates, because it's a totally different style at the college level.
Yeah. I just realized I had forgotten to share. I wondered what was going on. There, you should be able to see it now. Um, but yeah, just stepping back a second. Um, this is the breakdown of the leagues, and then this is Division I. West Point, obvious favorite. but from what I can tell, it could be a dogfight to determine who's going to come out of second place out of that group. So it's not a full round robin, I guess the way the scheduling worked. Um, but you should have a pretty good handle on who the second best team is based on who they have to play each other.
Yeah, no question. Well, we had to do with the format for two reasons. So one, just again, a little inside baseball is that this tournament, being 25, 30% larger than it's been on average traditionally, trying to shoehorn in this many teams to what as clubs have traditionally been used to the travel schedule of getting in, for Friday evening games going through Sunday. This is probably the last year before we have to adjust that because we were really strained to make space for all the teams that now, wanted to and are able to come. But in addition to that, we also wanted to stay away from intra-club matchups, where there could be, again, it's not accusatory at all. It just is what it is. You don't want to have any chicanery or even, the idea that there's conflicting motives going into a game of how you can help yourselves, help your practice mates going in. And so it made more sense to structure it so that West Point Black and West Point Gold don't play each other. We did the same thing on the women's side, where their intra-squad run-up wouldn't affect the ultimate standings. And the result will be that any team that could be tied will still have either a head-to-head matchup or 2 points of comparison with common opponents at least. And so there'll be plenty there to properly seed teams, even though we're a game short of a full round robin for a couple of teams.
Yeah, looking at it, to me, the primary scenario that would be somewhat a disappointment would be if North Carolina and Ohio State had tied records. I don't think they play each other. Um, so that would be kind of uh, they still control their own destiny based on the matches with the other teams, but we wouldn't have that head to head comparison. If it happens, we don't know what will happen, that they end up tied, if you will.
Yep. And that's, like I said, we do the best we can with the limitations. And I think, we're hopeful that there's plenty of evidence such that teams can feel they've proved it or not proved it on the court. But this is what we have, and we're still pretty excited about the different iterations of the format that we've put together here across a 20-team event.
To me, that's about the only scenario where there might be like a say, I wish they played each other. I think, however, I think based on some of the results and the strength of West Point this year, we could be looking at a West Point Black and Gold match in the final.
Yeah, I don't think, like I said, it's difficult to project, but I think that is as likely as any outcome. I think it's fair to say. There's Gold has looked really solid. I mean, they've made it to the Blue Cup Championship on their own, where they actually played Black in that game, and then got third place at Tar Heel earlier in the year. So they've been a strong team throughout the year and gave Carolina every bit of it. But again, that's 5-6 months ago. Injuries, form, hopefully improvement throughout the year. So we'll see where they stand. But to your point, an all West Point final has happened in the past, and it's definitely in the cards this year as well.
Yeah, and so those are some big games. I think. At, Making an assumption here, I'm West Point Black, very strong team. Would not surprise me if they run the table. And then I'm looking at West Point Gold and Ohio State, Carolina Air Force battling for that second spot. So I'm thinking that the matchup on the first day between Air Force and West Point Gold might go a long way to determining things, as will the West Point Gold matches between Carolina and Ohio State.
Yeah, I know we're going to have a lot of great matches, and that's one of the things that we're most excited. As like you said, there's still that iteration with theoretically Ohio State and Carolina being decided by common opponent goal difference rather than head to head on the court. But the give back for that we're really excited about is usually these teams have been having to position themselves for quarterfinals or semifinal matchups, determining their destiny by deciding who can win by 35 instead of 28 against certain teams in the run up.
You
And
don't
the
want that.
fact that, yeah, exactly. And that's been the standard throughout the years is, I know from firsthand experience coaching Ohio State's women's team that, the guys last year felt, oh, we should be
You broke up again, Mike. There, you're talking about your
playing West. Oh, I'm sorry
your
about that.
Ohio State women's team and the frustration that they had last year, and then it broke up a little bit.
Am I back?
You're back.
I apologize to the listeners driving through the mountains. Couldn't get where we needed to make a podcast on my for letting guys down. But yeah, Air Force, excuse me, it's Air Force in Carolina and West Point in Ohio State were the semifinal here. And so we had a rematch of the previous year's final in the semifinal, and everybody's undefeated going into it. And, which is a very difficult thing for teams because, ultimately you want a shot at the championship. You also want to be able to say you played for the championship. And so this will give us a better opportunity to predetermine, who's playing for silver versus bronze because there hasn't been enough opportunity to delineate who's playing what in semifinals other than, beating up on teams that aren't really up to the task as it has been in
Sure.
previous years.
Hey, real quick, if Pitt were to beat Carolina, how will the Division One format look like?
Yeah, so if Pitt beats Carolina, then they go straight into the same group, which is part of the thing that we needed to do to make sure when we do the play, and it has to matter to the team that's playing against them, other than just playing Vanguard against a new entrant. And so that game will count as the first group game for the resulting 3-team groups. Were that to occur, and then because West Point Black and West Point Gold we wouldn't want them in the same group. That group would become Carolina 0-1, Pittsburgh 1-0, and then West Point Black, and then Air Force and West Point Gold would join OSU Scarlet in the other group. And
okay, so
the same
it divides up into 2 groups of 3 and a round
exactly
robin for those groups.
correct.
Okay, all right. Well, let's move on to the Division Two. I'm going to pull up the um, the schematic that you sent me, and I guess we got. It's not quite a double elimination. It is, but maybe not in the traditional sense. We've got a lot of games where the loser still marches on, and the winner marches on to a different part of the bracket. And then we also have some games where it is an elimination game where competing for the D2 title goes away for the loser of that match. And the way I interpret it is if there is only one solid line coming out of the matchup, that match is an elimination game, so to speak. Is that
Correct.
match set? Correct. So right off the top, you'll have the North Carolina Tar Heels, the second team for North Carolina, playing Cortland, and then Ohio State Gray playing Olin in essentially elimination games, if you will, to move on in the bracket.
Yep, that's correct. And those are Ohio State Gray and Tar Heels are the four seeds in their respective conference region. And so
Breaking up again, Mike. So I think
four
what you're
seeds,
saying
the
is that
teams that are ranked third in their region or higher, rest.
Okay, so Cortland and Olin are kind of the underdog, if you will, and then the Tar Heels and Gray are the next 2 lowest teams, if you will.
Yes, and the remainder of the tournament is functionally a double elimination format because none of the top 4 seeds overall those are the ones that are entitled to the double elimination. So we don't have a strict 1 plays 10, 2 plays 9. We've balanced out the fairness of matchups with also the opportunity to be in the double elimination format. So what you actually have is 7 versus 10 or 6 versus 10 and 7 versus 9 to start. and that way it balances and it serves a variety of functions. It helped us with balancing out some regionality for the experiences of teams, but then also properly awarded the opportunity to stay alive and not be bounced from the tournament based on a season long result in one game. And so the top 4 seeds are entitled to that advantage, and then the teams playing against them are seeded accordingly, and they are up against it in their first matchup based on playing up. So it's tough to say they get an advantage because they traditionally would have been playing perhaps a more commonly matched opponent in a completely parallel format. But it all works out so that all the teams have an equal opportunity to finish 1 through 10. But we are respecting the fact that, hey, we've got a dozen plus games of evidence on most of these teams, and so we want to respect season-long performance and not make it a one and done or equally divvy out the double elimination advantage.
Yeah, I think it's it looks complicated, and it is a little bit complicated, but I kind of dug through it a little bit, and it made sense to me.
I'm glad you
Um,
say so. A lot of hours went into balancing the various masters we're trying to serve here in terms of competitive fairness, schedule demands, and regionality of giving teams opportunity to not travel all the way to Carolina to play a team they've already
yeah.
played 5 times as much as we can avoid it.
It's not perfect. It would be impossible for it to be perfect with the constraints that you have, but I think it is something that the different teams can work with, and everybody's going to get to play at least 4 games. So no whining, just win, baby.
Exactly right.
Yeah. And so it should be an interesting Division II matchup, and I'm really curious to see how some of those new teams like Olin and San Jose State uh, fare in this tournament. Should be interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the women's side. I just copied what you sent, so I was a little. I thought he left Ohio. He left state off of Ohio. Maybe he did that for a reason, and then I did not know what TH was. Um, Tar Heels. I should have figured
Yes.
that out. But talk a little bit about the 5 women's teams.
Yeah, so we have 5 teams from across 3 schools. Carolina Team Handball Club and West Point Women's each have 2 teams. And so, as I mentioned, from the Division 1 format, there's no, and functionally with this, since there's no second group, since it's just one big group, there's a variety of reasons that it doesn't make sense to have the intra club matchups. And so, yeah, these teams have crossed over and played each other over the course of the year. We hosted Ohio State. We hosted West Point's teams back in the fall. Tar Heels and Carolina have run their own Blue Cups, and unfortunately, there would have been another opportunity, but the planning for West Point's women's tournament crossed over with the women's training camp in Hungary, I believe, back in March. And the result of that was we lost a couple extra data points because we have a third of our roster that is typically involved in those training camps. I know Carolina has folks as well. And so it was unfortunate that we were not in a position to field a team to create another playing opportunity, but that's where everybody's sort of at as far as numbers and depth right now as we continue to build forward. But West Point Black and Carolina played in the final last year. They remain strong teams. I'm not exactly unbiased with regard to Ohio State, but I think we've got a pretty good group, and we're a step ahead of where we were at this stage last year. And I think we lost our goaltender to a terrible knee injury about 5 minutes into our first game last year. Katie Coaches, who is actually still recovering from that, which was a shock to the team and a really, really tough situation for her. And putting aside all the personal strife that levied on her, it was very difficult for our team to rebound from something like that and play the rest. So we're a better team now in a better situation. So hopefully we're in the mix there with what we would call the 2 first teams from the other sides, and West Point Golden Tar Heels continue to develop along. So I think we're going to have a very competitive format and across the 5 teams. But it's hard not to peg the 2 teams that played for the title in a very competitive final match, Carolina and West Point Black last year, as not the favorites to be in the same spot this year, despite my biases.
Here. Well, we're running low on time here, Mike. Um, Tournament kicks off tomorrow, 5 o'clock Eastern time. Runs 4 matches on 2 courts that evening, and then full day on Saturday from 7:50 a.m. all the way up till 7:45 p.m. and then wraps up tomorrow Sunday around 4:30. So a lot of matches, a lot of good competition. I'll be there. Looking forward to it. And um, any final thoughts before we wrap her up? We got like 45 seconds left.
No problem. Well, first, appreciate you dealing with technical difficulties. And then, second of all, for your listeners that can't make the trip out to Chapel Hill, we'll be publishing 2 YouTube streaming links. We'll have both courts live. We'll have the main court on our U.S. Handball Union YouTube channel, and the second court will be on the Great Lakes Team Handball YouTube channel because we just don't quite have enough subscribers to be able to do whatever we want on YouTube Live since they restrict that. So we'll make sure those are out. We'll get them to you so that you can put them up on your site along with this preview. And yeah, we're rocking and
Yep.
rolling. People want to play
We'll
handball,
put the
so we'll play a lot
preview
of it.
on. I'll put links to matches and scores and try and keep folks updated on social media this weekend. So for Michael King, I'm John Ryan, and thanks for listening. Let's see here. Got to stop the share and stop the recording.